You can't just, sit and wait for opportunities to come. So you need to create that opportunity yourself.
Welcome to How I Fixed It, a podcast where we cut the noise and learn step-by-step strategies entrepreneurs use to grow. I'm your host, Madhav Malhotra, and today I'm lucky to be joined by Arda Erturk, the Chief Communications Officer at Roll Scooters. Roll is an electric scooter company that operates in several Canadian cities, and I'm very excited to learn more about Arda's experiences with switching career paths to become an entrepreneur and the unexpected lessons that came up along the way. Thank you again so much for taking the time to join me today. I'm super excited to hear more about all of the complicated businessy things that you have in store for us. But first off, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your personal background and how it is that you got started working at Roll.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Mata, for inviting me. I appreciate it. So my name is Arda Erturk. I'm one of the co-founders of Roll and Chief Communications Officer at Roll. I came to Canada in 2016 for university to study at the U of T, and then in my second year, I started working at Scotiabank as an intern. It was an 8-month internship. I went back to school after that, and once I met another person at the U of T, he mentioned his new idea, bringing e-scooters to Canada. And at that time, there was no other e-scooter company operating in Canada. And I knew that in US, in Europe, other countries, Asia, it was really popular. So I said, okay, maybe I can join and we can start building it. And yeah, that's how everything started. I finished my studies. I'm now a full-time co-founder, finally.
Yes, I'm glad to hear you finally accomplished that milestone. It's amazing to see the progress at Roll. And to give a little bit more context, could you describe the services you offer and where you're located?
Yeah, we provide electric scooter sharing service to cities, businesses, and campuses. We are the only Canadian company, Canadian-owned, developed, and operated company operating in Canada right now. We launched our fleet of e-scooters in Kelowna first in 2019. We operated there for a few months, and then in 2020, in the midst of pandemic, we launched in Calgary, and then after a few months, we launched in Ottawa last year, and hopefully we're planning to launch in different cities across Canada this year. We deploy our electric scooters on the street. People can just download the Roll app and scan the QR code on the scooter to ride the scooter, and then once you ride it, you park the scooter, you take the picture of the how we parked it. It's similar to bike share, but we don't have the docking system, and it's really convenient.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how the scooters can be docked anywhere, and that way you don't have to be limited in just driving from place to place. And I know I could easily get sucked into the technical details, but I'd really love to start, first of all, by thinking about your story, how you mentioned that you didn't actually know you could be an entrepreneur, but you just met this person and decided, well, yeah, I could co-found a company like this. Were there any doubts you had? Were there any problems that you thought that you should learn about as you became a quote-unquote real entrepreneur?
Yeah, you don't have weekends, you work all the time, especially at the initial stage. You don't have a work-life balance. You need to maintain it at some point, but it's really hard, especially, depends on what business you're doing. But yeah, let me give you a little bit story. It was more like an opportunity, but also and luck factor as well. But also you need to create that opportunity. So I met this person. He's our CEO now, Richard. I met him at an event, and I was helping the student union to organize that event, and that's how I was kind of involved. So it was really, luck plus the creating the opportunity piece. And I always wanted to do something in the, like work in the startups, but like, where to start? That's a really hard question. Like, how can you start without enough capital, without knowing people that can be co-founders? So first of all, people, I think it's the most important component if you want to start your own business. And it's hard. It's hard. Like, how are you going to find those people? you might have some similar hobbies, maybe, like events. Maybe if you're a technical co-founder, you might be attending some events and you can meet them there. So it really depends, but you can't just, sit and wait for opportunities to come. So you need to create that opportunity yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand the initial idea about creating the right opportunity
Yeah.
and getting in the right environment to have these experiences come your way. Once you actually decided, okay, let me actually join this thing, is there any process that you were using to actually learn the basics that you needed to in this new type of career?
Yeah, at the very beginning, I only knew that scooters are a thing, in US, in Europe, and I didn't know anything about the industry. So what I did was just doing, research. There are multiple websites that I use, the CB Insights, reading the other companies' blogs, DataKit, Crunchbase, all those articles. And then the other component is funding. So I also didn't know anything about the whole VC world, angel world, or any, capital related stuff. But, learning is a continuous process, and I don't think there's an end. You will always learn throughout your journey. So I'm still doing those things. I'm reading books about funding investment, I'm reading articles, and there are always things that are changing in the investment world too. Like, not everything is staying the same.
Yeah, it is definitely super important to keep learning, and in terms of that, I know when it comes to my learning, usually it's the lessons learned the hard way that stick a little bit more. So, if you look back at your journey at Raw, when you are now expanding instead of just first joining the company, what were some phases where you ran into a lot of challenges, and how did you get around those phases of scaling the company?
Again, there were some times that, challenging times. Maybe, in the operations, like in every city we launched, except for the Kelowna launch yesterday, we were in the city, assembling the scooters, doing the deployment ourselves. So it was overwhelming. And sometimes we were thinking, okay, like without having enough capital, like our competitors have millions of dollars, but we're not at that level right now. We were thinking, oh, is it worth it? It's really overwhelming. It's mentally challenging. But, at the end of the day, it's really rewarding. Seeing people riding your scooters and, with a smile, it's really rewarding. So there's always going to be times where you're going to feel desperate, challenging. But at the end of the day, think about the rewards from the customer experience. You're going to see them. They're going to be happy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, actually, I personally resonate with that because one tool that I use when I'm feeling a little bit down or lost is to remind myself, why am I doing this? So
Mhm.
I imagine that helps your team, like, to actually see the end customer and have like a more real life context to what you're doing. Yeah.
And like think about, what would you do if you were not doing this? And you are signing up for this. But at the end of the day, if you build a sustainable business, if like a viable business, it's gonna be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So when you look back in retrospect now, I'm sure there are lots of lessons learned to feel proud of, but then also maybe a few embarrassing failures along the way. So could you tell me the story, just like all of the details about a lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
Yeah. There are many lessons learned. Fortunately, none of them were life changing. But my advice would be failing, making mistakes, it's not a bad thing because you learn from them. And I think that's what it matters. But if you keep doing the same mistakes and if you keep failing with the like same mistakes, then there's something wrong. From our experience, in the very beginning or even in the mid stage, we were always thinking, okay, let's do this as well. Let's do this business line. Let's explore this. But we needed staff. We needed more people to help with us. And at that stage, it was really costly. So we tried a lot of different stuff at the same time, and it was overwhelming. We didn't do everything well, and sometimes we weren't too successful. So this would be one lesson, just focus on some of the things until you come to a point where you're comfortable adding other stuff on top of the things you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Can we dive even deeper into the context there?
Oh yeah. So our main business is the shared electric scooters, and we wanted to do a retail side as well. We were gonna sell retail scooters, but the problem was, it requires a lot of marketing effort, a lot of research in terms of competitor offerings and market research. But we were really spending a lot of time with the shared scooters, and you need time to review all the data, everything. So there's a lot of stuff to do on that side. We didn't have enough time to focus on the retail, and we did some research and stuff, but didn't really reach to that point. So it was, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but I think we started a little bit earlier than what we should have done. And one mistake we did was making assumptions, in terms of the usage, in terms of some other components, like people might think this. It's a really, really dangerous thing to do, making assumptions. You need to validate that. Maybe, you know the product really good. Maybe, I mean, you're working with this product for too long and you're one of the co-founders, so you might be biased towards that specific assumption. My advice is really, don't ask your friends or anyone. Just ask your customers, ask other people who are not familiar, or maybe familiar, but make sure that they're not biased.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of another entrepreneur that we were talking to, was talking about the lean startup
Hmm.
movement and the build, measure, learn process. So right now, maybe there are some experiments that you're working on running at the moment. What types of data or metrics do you track to decide when an experiment is officially successful?
Um, yeah, in terms of the success measures, this is a really hard question, and I don't think there's a single metric or indicator that will give you whether this startup is successful or not. For our case, I think one thing would be the overall usage and customer satisfaction. Social media posts, are they happy? Are they giving us positive feedback? And in terms of the usage, when we compare with our competitors, are we successful? I think those are really important. And on the corporate side, the headcount is, I think, important in terms of the success. When you look at the past year, maybe 1 year ago, how many employees you had, and now how many employees you have, and see if there's an increase. It doesn't necessarily give you whether that it's successful or not, but it gives you some idea, from my opinion.
Hmm. And to dive a little bit into your corporate, I guess, employee dynamic
Yes.
at this scale, do you usually have like specific teams working on different experiments, and then maybe the co-founders are kind of managing all the different experiments on top of that?
So yeah, I was giving that metric, the head count, but I think we are still working towards that. And in terms of our structure, we have operational staff in each city we operate. We have city managers, we have operations lead under them, and logistics staff. And for our headquarters, we have a small software team, and I'm handling the business development and stuff. We sometimes hire interns, and we're actually hiring some other full-time staff. But mostly, Mathal, we are still entrepreneurs and we're still dealing with everything ourselves. My title is Chief Communications Officer, but to be honest, I'm doing business development, partnerships, government affairs, even tech. Like a few days ago, my major is data science and machine learning, and I was talking to our CTO about some cluster algorithms to implement for our app. So, as an entrepreneur, you will wear multiple hats, maybe for 3, 4 years, maybe forever, but it's not a bad thing. You learn a lot of stuff. And personally, I'm glad that I had exposure to, different areas, different fields. I learned how to talk to counselors. I learned how to talk to partners, how to build those partnerships. I learned marketing, and I didn't take any marketing course, and it's purely experience. Just talking to reporters and everything. Maybe for my next startup, Mathau, I will be more knowledgeable on those a lot of field, and the learning process will be much faster, and like the building process will be much faster, and it will be better for me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing because usually I ask people, which resources influenced you? Were there any mentors that guided you? But it's really impressive how it was just go into it, see what happens, figure it out, fail, and keep moving. That is an amazing vision of how much you can let. And if you were to think about, all of these things that you're doing now, are there any, I guess, guidelines or rules that you've created for yourself on how to market well, how to research competitors well, how to talk to government officials well, that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, I don't usually use specific tools or frameworks, but a few rule of thumbs for me. One is don't make assumptions. Always validate with the people who are not biased. The other would be, I know people in this field who are sometimes people can be mean, rude, and this is also reflected in their position, how they interact with their customers. And it's not good, I experienced this personally. I know some of those people. So always, be kind, be polite with the people that you're talking to, listen to them. One other thing would be mentors. As you said, mentors are really important. Build your network, know as much as people as you can, not specifically in your field, but have some key mentors that are knowledgeable about your industry. And yeah, like always believe in yourself. There will be challenging times, but always believe in what you're doing and be confident. I think these would be my key advices.
Mm-hmm. And regarding the point about the mentors, I think it would be really valuable to have a real life example to contextualize just the enormous value that mentors can provide. So would you be able to share an example of in your journey when a mentor helped with some key decision at all?
Yeah, maybe not specifically for one mentor, but we have several mentors, and thanks to Techstars Network, we met wonderful people. So one thing that will come up, you will hear different stuff from different mentors, and how are you gonna decide whether which one is correct? And that's also kind of the validation process. Yeah, I don't think there was a moment where a mentor said something and changed our entire business, but most of the feedback were mostly kind of maybe you should change this, like maybe you should focus on this, maybe you should go after some other markets. And we had some mentors, Manpower, that said, oh, like scooter business is not really good, just do something else. If we did everything that our mentor said to us, we wouldn't be doing this business right now. So yeah, like you hear some conflicting ideas, conflicting structures, and it's your job, like as an entrepreneur, it's your job to realize and learn which one is correct, which one would be the right path to choose. And sometimes it's not always the right path. You're going to make the mistake, and you're going to go into the wrong path, and you're going to realize, you're going to learn that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people say how they have all of these different sources of information, and at first it's just like, hey, we got our first mentor, let's just listen to everything they say. But later on, you have to be the one to piece together, which source actually is correct. In my personal experience, it's always been an interesting process because during those periods, I always found that in my teams, that's where it was most important for us to actually come together and align our different perspectives. Because that I found was the hardest part, like figuring out who to trust outside of our team. So I don't know if that's a similar process that you and your co-founders went with, but did you have any tools you used to have those hard discussions?
Yes, that's a good question. As you said, mentors, when they say something, like it's not always a case that it's going to be true. Again, just like in terms of the mentors' feedback, always appreciate it because those people, take time to talk to you and give you their feedback. So even though that's not something that you would agree on, still, appreciate their time and I appreciate their feedback. And one thing that I do is just thinking about that myself first, and then do some research if there's any other company is doing it or if there's any similar concept that is already being implemented, and maybe ask the customers, ask the people that are not biased towards the product. Yeah, like always do your research, do your own research.
In the e-scooter industry with the competitiveness, I suppose that also applies to you for deciding if you want to adopt like a competitor's strategy or do something unique yourself.
Yeah. Like we look at our competitors to, what they're offering and try to see if they're viable. But also, there's some mentors that said, "Oh, don't compete with them in the same market. Do some different strategies. Maybe even smaller markets." But it's not necessarily true like all the time. Like, if you want to become a big company, if you have dreams, you can't compete in the small markets, and you can't just keep launching in the small markets. You need to compete with them. And so far, we have been successful.
Yeah, I really like these 2 points we keep coming back to about being kind above all else, and then also being very careful about how we go and validate ideas and challenge assumptions. So, lastly, do you have any resources or tips to think about when you go and interview customers and get validation?
Um, we did some user testing through some different platforms. So I didn't do user testing myself, but it's an iterative process, and it's always going to change. Even big companies like Facebook app, and when you look at other big companies, they're always changing, adding new stuff, trying things. And one thing that we're doing in terms of the app design, I mean, it's more like a specific thing, but following the heuristic design principles is, I think, really important. I'm also kind of into the UI UX design, so I know a little bit technical details about that. Heuristic design is some really important principles that UI and UX designers follow. These are like being concise and how to prevent errors. So basically, the whole idea is to make it easy and simple for the end user to understand what they're supposed to do on the page that they're seeing. Yeah, and it's a really good practice to follow all the. I think there are like 7, 9 principles in total. At Rolls, we always follow the heuristic design. When we design a new function, new page, we always follow these principles. And in addition to that, it's not just heuristic design, but also user interview process is really, really important. Like maybe, you follow all the heuristic design and everything, but still, maybe things might change after you see the whole user interviews, how they react to some of the things. So I would say heuristic design is not just something that you need to look at, but also do user interviews, compare your results, because maybe you are making some assumptions during the heuristic design, but at the end of the day, when you're in the field, when you're showing this app to your customers, it may be totally different. Yeah, like use user interview websites. There are some tools that you can use. Don't do it yourself because you will be biased. Just give some instructions, but don't do the user interviews yourself. Just find some. Even friends would be maybe okay, but if you have enough resources, I would really recommend you to work with some companies that are doing this user interviews. And there are some really cool companies. Like I met a co-founder of a company. They're using AI tools to watch the face interactions and the face emotions and everything to come up with a kind of a score that will give you some idea, on the user experience.
Yeah, I would definitely be very glad to add any links to resources like that you'd want to share in the description. and also, of course, Roll's website. And I really appreciate, just in general, you taking the time to walk us through all of these insights from your personal experience. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next at Roll.
Yeah, thanks, Mata, and I appreciate inviting me again. And I hope the things that I said would be useful.